Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. The party wasn't supposed to be anything special, just another night. It was supposed to be a simple evening with friends, a few drinks, some loud music, and a distraction from the dull humdrum of life. But by the end of it, nothing would be the same. And all it took was one glance. I could feel the weight of the evening pressing on me the moment I stepped into the apartment. The chatter, the laughter, the clink of glasses, they were like a foreign language now. As I pushed through the crowd, I had to remind myself that I had been invited here for a reason, that this was just a night to unwind, to not worry about everything else. But it wasn't that simple, was it? The first few hours were fine. Nothing out of the ordinary. People were friendly, some of them familiar faces from work or old acquaintances. I didn't feel like myself, though, too detached, too off-center. I couldn't pinpoint why, but something was slowly gnawing at me. And then, I saw them. Clara, my wife, was laughing a little too loudly, a little too freely with a man I didn't recognize. Her eyes were brighter than usual, and her smile? It was different. She had that look in her eyes, that look that told me she was having a good time. A bit too good, if you asked me. My stomach tightened, and I tried to push it down. Maybe I was imagining things. It could just be a harmless conversation, right? But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just the way they spoke, or the way she threw her head back when she laughed. It wasn't just the way she touched his arm or the way he touched hers. It was the subtle things, the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching, the way her body was angled just so, as if she was leaning into him. Something was different about tonight, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. It felt like an electric charge in the air, one I couldn't quite touch but could feel buzzing all around me. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it, that I was reading too much into a situation that didn't need to be analyzed. But every part of me, every instinct I had, screamed that something wasn't right. They moved to the dance floor after a while. The song was upbeat, the kind that everyone claps along to, but Clara and this stranger, the guy who kept leaning in too close, they weren't clapping. They were dancing, and it wasn't just casual. It wasn't just a couple of steps to the beat. No, they were moving in sync. She was following him, almost like she was in a trance, and he was leading her through it, as if they had rehearsed it 1,000 times before. I could feel my pulse quicken, my breath shortened. I tried to push through the crowd, to make my way to the bar, but my eyes kept darting back to them. To her, to the way she moved with him, to the way she smiled, that smile that wasn't for me. I should have been rational. I should have turned away, gone back to the bar, had a drink, and not overthought everything. But I couldn't. It wasn't jealousy. No, it wasn't that. It was something worse. It was the realization that this wasn't just a party for Clara. It wasn't just a night out for her. She was somewhere else, and I wasn't a part of it. I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out right then, but I stayed. Maybe because I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't handle his emotions. Maybe because I wasn't ready to face the truth of what was happening before my very eyes. I watched them as they danced, their movements becoming more fluid, more intimate. Clara's back was arched slightly, and his hand was pressed against her side. Their faces were close now, almost too close. And that's when it hit me. That's when everything fell apart. I couldn't stand it any longer. I turned on my heel and made my way toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see it anymore. I needed out. I needed air. I needed to escape. But as I walked down the hall toward the exit, I paused. I didn't know why, but something inside me told me to stop, to take a moment and think. I turned back and walked toward the table where Clara had been sitting earlier. I glanced over at her empty chair, and in that instant, I knew what I had to do. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it gently on the chair. It was a quiet gesture, a small one, but it felt monumental. It was my way of saying goodbye, not just to Clara, but to the version of me that still believed in everything we had. I wasn't angry. I wasn't screaming or shouting. I was just done. The weight of it all, the confusion, the heartbreak, the realization that everything I thought I knew about my marriage had been a lie, settled in my chest. It hurt, but there was also a strange sense of clarity that followed. I left without looking back, and as I walked out into the night, I wondered if Clara would even notice. But I knew I would never be able to look at her the same way again. The night had started so innocently. A casual party, some drinks, and a chance to reconnect with people we hadn't seen in a while. But as I stepped into the hallway, that feeling that had been building inside me only grew stronger. I had left my wedding ring on her chair like some kind of silent protest, a message I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. But I knew it wouldn't go unnoticed. Clara would see it eventually. What bothered me wasn't just what happened at the party. It was the fact that I had ignored the warning signs for so long. Maybe it had been happening for months, maybe even longer, but I hadn't let myself see it. Maybe I had been too blind, too trusting. The moment I walked out the door, I felt a strange kind of relief, like the tension in my chest had finally been released. I should have felt anger. I should have felt betrayed. But all I felt was an emptiness. The kind that comes when you realize that the person you thought you knew so well has been hiding something from you for a long time. I didn't go home right away. I drove around aimlessly for what felt like hours, trying to clear my head, but the image of Clara and Mike, the way they danced so close, so effortlessly, kept playing in my mind. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just overreacting, but deep down, I knew what I had seen. I had seen something that couldn't be ignored. Clara wasn't just enjoying herself at a party. She was enjoying herself with him. And for a moment, I wondered if I was just another prop in her life, another figure in the background. Was that all I had ever been? Around midnight, I drove to a quiet diner, hoping to get a grip on myself. I sat in the corner booth, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. It was then that I saw a message on my phone, a notification from Clara. "Where did you go?" it read. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. I knew I should have responded. I should have said something, anything. But all I could think about was her. The way she looked at Mike. The way her body moved in rhythm with his. The way she had practically forgotten I existed the moment he stepped into her world. I didn't reply. Instead, I slid my phone back into my pocket, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. She would have to figure this out on her own. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to be the one to fix things. I didn't owe her an explanation. Not anymore. But as I sat there, a thought started to form in my mind, one that I couldn't shake. Maybe this wasn't just about her. Maybe this was about me, too. Maybe I had been too comfortable, too passive, in my own marriage. I couldn't stop thinking about that ring. The way it felt cold in my hand as I placed it on her chair. The symbolic gesture, however small, had felt like a release. But now, in the quiet of the diner, I realized something. I wasn't just walking away from Clara. I was walking away from the version of myself that had allowed this to happen. I had let things slide, ignored the signs, made excuses. But now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The doorbell jingled as a man walked into the diner, and the moment I looked up, my stomach dropped. It was Mike, the same guy from the party. He glanced around the room for a moment, then caught my eye. I quickly looked away, hoping he hadn't noticed me, but it was too late. He walked toward the counter, and I could feel his gaze on me the entire time. There was no mistaking it. He knew who I was. And the worst part? He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look guilty. He looked confident. I tried to focus on my coffee, but I couldn't help myself. I glanced up once more, just in time to see him make a beeline toward a table in the back. Clara. She was sitting there, her back to me, talking to him like they were the only two people in the room. I felt a sudden wave of nausea. I had to leave. I couldn't sit there, couldn't watch them interact like that. So, I paid for my coffee and stood up, trying to keep my cool, trying not to let my emotions get the best of me. But as I walked out of the diner, I realized I wasn't leaving just the party behind. I was leaving her. And I was leaving all the illusions I had held onto for so long. Maybe it was over, maybe it wasn't. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to who I was before. The drive back home felt like a blur. The streets passed by in a haze, each turn and intersection barely registering in my mind. I wasn't really thinking about where I was going or what I was doing. My mind kept drifting back to Clara. I could still see her, laughing and dancing with him. I could still hear the sound of her laughter, so carefree and light. She hadn't laughed like that with me in months, maybe even longer. It wasn't just the dancing, though. It was everything. The way she was looking at him. The way she wasn't even pretending to care about me being there. I got home to an empty house, and for a moment, it was quiet, too quiet. The emptiness of it felt suffocating, but strangely, I felt at peace. I had never realized how much I was suffocating in that relationship until now. Clara's absence felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. I had left the ring on her chair, yes, but I wasn't sure what I expected her to do next. Would she call me? Would she be angry? I wasn't sure, but a small part of me didn't want to know. I didn't want her to apologize. I didn't want her to try to explain away the way she had been with him. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not after what I had seen. There was a part of me that still wondered if I was making a mistake, if I was overreacting. But another part of me, one that had been pushed aside for so long, was telling me that this was exactly what needed to happen. I couldn't keep living in a lie, and neither could she. As I sat on the couch, staring at the TV, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I reached for it slowly, not sure if I wanted to know who it was. But I knew it was Clara. It was a message. "Where are you?" it read. "You left without saying anything. What happened?" The words stung more than they should have. She was trying to act innocent, trying to make it sound like I had done something wrong by leaving. But I knew better. She knew exactly why I had left. She knew exactly what I had seen. I didn't reply. I let the phone sit there, buzzing every few minutes with more messages, more questions. But I didn't want to talk to her. Not now. Not after everything. The silence in the house was deafening. And yet, there was something comforting about it. It felt like freedom. I had been living in the shadows of a relationship that no longer existed, and for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. But just as I began to settle into the quiet, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat. I knew who it was. I didn't get up right away. I didn't want to face her. But the doorbell rang again, more urgently this time. I walked over slowly, almost as if I were preparing myself for a confrontation I didn't want to have. When I opened the door, there she was, Clara, standing in the doorway with her eyes wide and filled with uncertainty. "You left," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, watching the way she stood there, looking so small and vulnerable. It was almost as if the woman who had been dancing with Mike just hours ago was gone, replaced by someone else, a person I didn't recognize. "I had to go," I finally said, my voice rough. "I couldn't stay there, not after what I saw." Her face faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "What do you mean? What did you see?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at her. The anger was bubbling up, but I kept it down. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to fight. "I saw you," I said, my voice low. "With him, dancing, laughing, like you've forgotten about me." She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say, and that, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. "I saw you with him," I repeated, this time louder. "And I'm done pretending I don't see it." There was a long silence. Clara stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mixture of guilt and confusion. I couldn't tell if she was sorry or if she was just surprised that I had caught on. Either way, I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. "Why, Clara?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "Why him? Why did you have to go there?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked away, her eyes searching for something to latch onto. But there was nothing. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she finally whispered. I don't know." The words sounded empty. "Hollow. I saw enough," I said quietly. "I saw everything I needed to see." And with that, I closed the door. I leaned against the door, my heart still racing, my mind whirling with 1,000 thoughts. Clara stood on the other side, silent. Her presence felt even though I had shut her out. For a few moments, all I could hear was the pounding of my pulse, the deafening silence that followed my decision. I didn't know if I was relieved or devastated. Maybe both. My thoughts kept circling back to the same thing. The way Clara had looked at him, the way she let herself fall into his arms so easily, like there was nothing between us. The woman I had known for years, the woman I thought was mine, had just slipped through my fingers. And the worst part? I had allowed it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout at her through the door, to demand answers, to force her to feel the weight of what she had done. But instead, I stayed there, frozen. Something inside me told me not to engage, not to give her the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Clara stayed outside for what felt like hours. I didn't move from my spot, even though I knew she was probably waiting for me to open the door, to talk to her, to fix it. But what was there to fix? I glanced at my phone again, more out of habit than anything else. There were dozens of unread messages, all from Clara. The usual apologies, the requests to talk, the "we need to figure this out" messages. They all felt like lies. She was trying to make it sound like we could just sweep it under the rug, as if nothing had changed, as if I hadn't seen everything I needed to see. I stood there, staring at my phone, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I could feel the temptation to reply, to open the door, to act like it was just another fight. But it wasn't just another fight. This was different. This was the moment everything fell apart. I opened the door, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I needed to know. I needed to hear her say it. To hear her tell me that everything I had seen was just a misunderstanding, that it wasn't what it looked like. Clara was still there, standing on the other side, her face pale, her eyes wide with something between fear and shame. She had no idea what to say. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she was waiting for me to give her permission to speak. "Clara," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "Why?" Her gaze dropped to the ground, and for a moment, she looked like a different person. The confident woman I had known for so long was gone, replaced by someone broken. "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." The words were empty. She wasn't even trying to explain herself anymore. She wasn't trying to make it right. She was just saying whatever came to her head to fill the silence. I shook my head, stepping back to let her in, but not because I wanted to let her off the hook. I needed to hear her say it. Needed to know if there was anything left in her that was real. "Don't you get it?" I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "You didn't just let it happen. You chose it. You chose him over me, over us." Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe regret, but she didn't say anything. The truth was too raw, too much to bear. She had no answer. "Where does this leave us?" I asked, more to myself than to her. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know anymore." And that was it. There was nothing more to say. I looked at her one last time, at the woman I thought I knew, and I knew it was over. There was no coming back from this. No fixing it. We were two people who had drifted so far apart that we were strangers to each other now. "I'm done," I said, my voice firm, final. Clara looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. I saw the tears welling up, but I didn't feel anything. I had already let go. I turned around, heading back into the house, the door clicking shut behind me. There would be no more calls. No more messages. No more pretending. The silence that followed her departure felt almost suffocating. It wasn't the quiet I expected. It wasn't peaceful. It was a cold, empty silence, as if the walls were closing in on me. I sat in the living room, staring at the space where we had once shared so many moments. The couch, the coffee table, the small trinkets we had collected together over the years. They now felt foreign, like remnants of a life that no longer belonged to me. I didn't know what to do with myself. There was no comfort in being home. There was no comfort in being anywhere anymore. It felt like I had erased everything. My past, my future, my marriage, all vanished in the span of a few hours. And I couldn't bring myself to regret any of it. The messages from Clara kept coming. The phone buzzed relentlessly. I could see them light up on the screen, one after another. At first, I thought about reading them, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they would say. They would all be apologies, empty promises, and pleas for us to talk, to figure things out. But I wasn't interested in her words anymore. I was past the point of listening to what she said and looking at what she did. It was all a game. It always had been. It wasn't just the dancing with him. It was everything that led up to it. The distance that had been creeping between us for months, the late nights, the lies she had spun so well. I had ignored it all, but I couldn't anymore. I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the couch, standing up to pace the room. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from something deeper, something raw. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wanted to throw things, but I held myself back. Instead, I just kept walking. Walking like I was trying to outrun the truth. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't even glance at it. This time, it was different. I felt like I was finally seeing clearly, like the fog had lifted. The years of pretending, of convincing myself that everything would be fine, had all come crashing down. This wasn't a marriage. This wasn't love. It was a routine. It was an illusion. As I walked through the house, the weight of the past hit me all at once. The memories that used to make me smile now felt like a burden. I remembered when Clara and I first moved in together, how excited we were to build a life. We were a team, a partnership, and nothing could come between us. At least, that's what I thought. But now, it felt like everything had been a lie. Clara had found someone else, and I had been too blind to see it. The truth was staring me in the face now, and I didn't know what to do with it. Should I be angry? Should I be sad? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I was done. I thought about calling her, about confronting her in person, but I knew I didn't need to. She knew. She knew what she had done, and nothing she could say would change the fact that I had seen her for what she really was. The front door creaked open, and I froze. For a moment, I thought maybe it was Clara, coming back to talk, to beg for forgiveness, or to convince me that things could still be fixed. But when I turned, it wasn't her. It was Mike. He stepped into the room like he belonged there, as if everything was fine. He walked in confidently, like he had every right to be here. My heart dropped, and a wave of disgust washed over me. I didn't even know what to say to him. "I figured you'd want to talk," he said, his tone casual, almost too casual. I just stared at him, my mind racing. What was he doing here? Did Clara send him? Was he going to rub it in my face? "What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice low, filled with a quiet rage I didn't know I had in me. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a step further into the room, looking around like he was inspecting the place, as if this were some kind of business transaction. "I just wanted to clear the air," he said finally, his voice smooth, almost friendly. "There's no reason for things to be so tense, right?" Tense. I couldn't believe the nerve of him. Here he was, standing in my house, after everything that had happened, and he was acting like we were having some sort of casual conversation. "Clear the air," I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my chest. "You're joking, right?" He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, his eyes cold and calculating. "Look, man, I get it. This isn't easy. But Clara, she's moved on. You know that, right?" The words hit me harder than I expected, as if I didn't already know. I had seen it with my own eyes. But hearing it from him made it real. It made it final. "Get out," I said, my voice suddenly firm, cold. He didn't argue. Instead, he gave me a small, almost mocking smile, and without saying another word, he walked out. I closed the door behind him, locking it, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but at that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I was done living in the shadow of someone who no longer cared. The air in the house felt thick, heavy with everything unsaid. I stood there, at the door, just staring at the empty space Mike had left behind. I could still feel the weight of his presence lingering in the room, like an unwelcome shadow. He had been so calm, so collected, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath my feet. But what hit me the hardest wasn't the way he spoke. It was the way he didn't speak. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem remotely guilty. It was as if he had just accepted the fact that Clara was his now, and I was nothing more than a ghost in my own life. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the reality of the situation crashed over me again, suffocating me. Every corner of this house, every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, it all felt like a reminder of the person I used to be. The man who believed in love, in commitment, in trust. But now I didn't know who I was anymore. I walked to the kitchen, my footsteps slow, deliberate. I needed something to keep my hands busy, something to do that would make the time pass. But there was no escaping the truth that was closing in on me. The reality of Clara's betrayal was like a constant weight pressing down on my chest. She had danced with him, laughed with him, shared something with him that I thought only belonged to us. The thought of it made my stomach churn. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, but it didn't help. Nothing felt right anymore. The house was too quiet, too empty. My phone buzzed again, and I picked it up without thinking. Another message from Clara. "I'm sorry," it read. "I never meant for it to happen like this. Please talk to me." The words stung, but there was something else there too. A part of me that still wanted to know why. A part of me that wasn't quite ready to walk away completely. But I wasn't that person anymore. The person who would blindly accept excuses, who would forgive over and over, thinking things would magically fix themselves. I set the phone down, leaving her message unread. She would keep apologizing. She would keep asking me to come back, to forgive her, to pretend nothing had happened. But the truth was, I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. It wasn't just Mike. It wasn't just her dancing with him. It was everything. The lies. The distance. The feeling that I had been slowly losing her for months, maybe years, and I hadn't even noticed until now. The doorbell rang again, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even wonder who it was. I knew. I opened the door, and there she was. Clara. Her eyes were red, puffy from crying, but she still tried to hold herself together. She stood there, hesitant, waiting for me to say something, anything. "I know you're angry," she started, her voice trembling. "I know I messed up. But please, just let me explain." I didn't want to hear her explanation. I didn't want to listen to her words anymore. "Clara," I said, cutting her off. "I've heard enough." Her eyes flickered with something. Shock, maybe disbelief. "Please, just let me talk." But I couldn't let her. Not anymore. "No," I said, shaking my head. "There's nothing left to say." She looked at me, her face contorting with pain, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "Not anymore. I was never enough for you, was I?" I asked, the bitterness slipping into my voice. "Not in the way he is. I'm just a placeholder, a guy you settled for when he wasn't around." The words hit her harder than I thought they would. Her face fell, and she took a step back, as if the weight of my words had physically pushed her away. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to be this way. But it was this way. This was the reality now, and I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't." I stepped back, closing the door between us, not out of anger but out of necessity. I needed space. I needed to be alone with my thoughts. As I walked back into the living room, I could feel my chest tightening again, but this time, it wasn't with grief. It was with something else. Something I couldn't name. Clara's presence had always been a comfort to me, but now, she was a reminder of everything I had lost. It was time to stop being a spectator in my own life. It was time to move forward, to let go. But where would I go from here? I had no idea. All I knew was that whatever I had with Clara was over, and I was done pretending otherwise. The next few days passed in a blur. The house felt like a ghost town, only I was the ghost. Every corner I turned, every familiar object I passed, carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just the emptiness of her absence. It was the realization that I had been living in a lie for so long, and now there was no escaping it. I stayed home, pacing around the house, lost in thought. The idea of confronting Clara again made my stomach turn. What was there left to say? What was the point of talking if everything between us had already unraveled? I went to work, but it felt like I was walking through a fog. People spoke to me, but I couldn't hear them. I answered questions mechanically, my mind still stuck on that moment, the one where I left the ring on the chair. The decision to walk out, to leave everything behind, had been both the hardest and the easiest thing I'd ever done. The hardest because I was saying goodbye to a part of my life, and the easiest because I knew, deep down, I couldn't keep living that way. Clara's call stopped after the first few days. She sent messages, but they grew quieter, more desperate. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I couldn't let myself slip back into the pattern of forgiving her, of letting her off the hook every time. This time, I needed to be strong. One evening, about a week after everything had happened, I decided to leave the house. I needed a change of scenery, a break from the walls that seemed to be closing in on me. I ended up at a small bar on the outskirts of town. It wasn't anything fancy, just a hole-in-the-wall kind of place where people came to forget their problems for a while. I ordered a drink and found a seat in the back, away from everyone else. The hum of conversation and the clink of glasses filled the air, but it didn't bother me. I liked the noise. It felt like I was in the middle of something, even if I didn't belong. As I sat there, I noticed a woman at the bar, sipping her drink with a thoughtful expression on her face. She wasn't anything extraordinary, but there was something about the way she carried herself. She seemed detached, like she was lost in her own world. For a moment, I wondered if she, too, was running from something. She caught my eye, and I nodded politely. She smiled faintly, then turned back to her drink. I didn't expect her to say anything, but then, she did. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice soft but inviting. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to open up to a complete stranger, but something in her expression made me think she might understand. "Something like that," I replied, offering a half-hearted smile. She nodded knowingly, as if she'd heard this story before. She didn't press further, and for a while, we just sat in silence. It was comfortable, though, the kind of silence that didn't require anything. Eventually, she spoke again. "You're not the first one to feel lost, but you won't be the last either." I wasn't sure what to make of her words, but they stuck with me. There was something about her calm demeanor, her ability to sit with her own thoughts without rushing to fill the space with words, that felt foreign to me. I had spent so much time running from my own thoughts, avoiding the pain of confronting the truth. We didn't talk much after that. But the brief exchange stayed with me as I left the bar later that night. I walked out into the cool air, feeling a little lighter, though not completely free. It was like I had taken the first step towards something, though I didn't know what that something was. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. Clara. Another message. Please, it read. We need to talk. I can't do this without you. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I had been avoiding her for days, but this time, the message felt different. It wasn't an apology anymore. It was something else, something desperate. I closed the message without responding, tossing my phone into the passenger seat of the car. I wasn't ready to go back to her, to let myself fall into the same patterns. I had spent years convincing myself that I could fix everything, that I could be the one to make things right. But I couldn't fix her. I couldn't fix us. As I started the car and drove off, I felt a strange sense of finality. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was moving forward. But where to? I didn't know yet. The days after I left Clara felt like I was shedding a skin I had worn for too long. The weight that had been suffocating me for months, or maybe even years, started to lift. The more I distanced myself from her, the clearer my thoughts became. I realized just how much I had lost myself in that relationship, how much of my own happiness I had sacrificed for someone who had no intention of returning the favor. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I would hear a familiar song on the radio, or walk by a store we used to visit together, and it would all rush back. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. Slowly, I started reclaiming my life, piece by piece. I spent time with friends I hadn't seen in ages, rediscovered hobbies I had put aside, and, most importantly, began focusing on myself again. Then, about 6 months later, I got a call. It was from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in a while. It was Ben, a guy I had known since high school, someone who had been there through thick and thin. He invited me out for a drink, and after some hesitation, I agreed. We met at that same bar where I had gone months ago, the one on the outskirts of town. Ben was sitting at the bar when I walked in, a big grin on his face as soon as he saw me. He had that look, the kind of look that said he knew something I didn't. "Man, it's good to see you," he said, pulling me into a hug. "It's been too long." We caught up for a while, talking about work, life, the usual stuff. But then Ben leaned in, his tone changing, a bit more serious. "Look, I don't know if you're ready to hear this, but I thought you should know," he said, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "Clara's been reaching out to everyone trying to get back in touch with you. Not just you, but a bunch of people. Asking about you, trying to get your attention." A small laugh escaped me, though it didn't feel like humor. It was more like the last remnants of my anger that had finally bubbled up. "Of course she is," I muttered, taking a sip of my drink. "Why wouldn't she? She's probably lonely, having messed everything up with Mike, too." Ben looked at me with a knowing expression. "It's worse than that, man. Mike dumped her. Apparently, he wasn't as into her as she thought. The guy was only using her to get back at someone else. I thought you should know. Clara's not exactly living the dream right now." For the first time in months, a wave of something, relief, maybe, washed over me. Clara, the woman who had shattered my trust, had tried to rebuild herself on someone else's back. And now, it had all come crashing down. "That's her karma, I guess," I said, shaking my head. "I don't feel sorry for her, though. Not anymore." Ben gave me a sympathetic look. "You're better off, man. You know that, right?" I nodded, knowing deep down that I was free. The world wasn't just wide open for me. It was mine to take. And that's when I realized it. Life wasn't about getting back at people or making them pay for their mistakes. Life was about moving forward, about finding joy in the simple things. I had been living under Clara's shadow for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand in my own light. A few weeks later, I ran into Clara again, by accident, of course. She was walking down the street, looking different. Gone was the confident woman who had once been so sure of herself. She looked tired, defeated. There was no anger in my chest when I saw her, just a strange sense of calm. She stopped when she saw me, her face turning pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but I stopped her. "I'm doing just fine," I said, my voice steady. "Better than fine, actually. You should try it sometime." She blinked, her lips trembling. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to be the one to fix her. Not anymore. "Goodbye, Clara," I said, turning on my heel. As I walked away, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person I had been when I left that party. I had let go of the past, let go of her. And now, I was free. I spent the next year traveling, pursuing new goals, and even starting a relationship with someone who truly respected me, someone who saw me for who I was. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I wasn't defined by Clara. And as for her, she learned her lesson in the hardest way possible. But that was her journey, not mine. The universe had a way of making sure people got what they deserved. And I was finally at peace with that. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.